Take a look at these before videos of this volleyball hitter. What do you notice? Take a quick look at these pro volleyball players' body positions. Notice the turn of their shoulders versus the turn of their hips. They are in two dramatically different rotated positions. Let's look at her before shots again and freeze them just before contact. Now compare her hitting mechanics compared to the pros. You'll notice the pro player has a reversed power C position, and also look at the massive separation between his shoulder and hip turn. He has almost 90 degrees of shoulder turn compared to his hips. Notice in her initial swing that because of her lack of T-spine mobility, she stays almost 100% straight with her legs and upper body. After mobility and stability work, she was able to fire her hips through before her spine and hitting arm, a much better biomechanic sequence that leads to a reverse C position. You can see in her initial swings that her whole body moves together, which is why you can see that these lines are basically on plane with one another. Both her hips and shoulders move at the same time, and the majority of her swing comes from just her arm. This was due to her inability to separate the turn of her shoulders from the turn of her hips. In the second image, you can see that the hips and shoulders are in much different positions, demonstrating much greater mobility, stability, and separation. Also notice here the difference between her landing on 1 foot in the pictures before and on 2 feet after. More spine and hip mobility has allowed her body to land in a safer position on 2 feet and reduce the chance of injuries related to landing on 1. So how do we go from the before shots to the after? First, we tested the mobility of her thoracic spine from both the left and right sides and identify if her range of motion was limited or restricted to the right or left, which would inhibit her hitting power and arm speed. She was restricted to her right, so we worked initially on her right T-spine turn. Next, we used the PowerCore 360 torso harness to help open up her T-spine flexibility. The rubber tubing provided slight assistance to her torso turn to her right. She was instructed to turn to the right, and then breathe in, and then exhale and turn a little further. She did this mobility and breathing exercise 3 times to her right. Then she strengthens the muscles in this newly increased range of motion. We attached tubing once again and had her turn against resistance. So we have her turn to the left as far as she can comfortably, and then turn a couple inches back to her right where she holds for 6 seconds while breathing. Then she slowly turns as far as she can to the right and holds for 6 seconds while breathing. This develops stability and strength throughout her range of motion. While mobility is great, she needs to be able to stabilize and control that mobility. Next, we focus on the hips. Specifically for hip and shoulder separation, we want her hips to turn before the shoulders and hitting arm come through. So we attached a band to her right hip and connect it in front of the athlete so the bands are pulling and turning the hips to her left. This will promote the sequence of her hips turning to her left before the shoulders turn through. Last, we will combine these 2 exercises into a very, very slow mobility and stability exercise. This exercise uses a very light band on the torso to help keep the torso from moving, while another band assisting the turn of her hips to the left. The athlete focuses on trying to slowly turn the hips to the left, independent of the turn of the shoulders, to increase hip and shoulder separation and ultimately greater hitting power and arm and ball speed. After she performs these 3 exercises, she hits, serves, and then takes attack swings. This progression takes about 10 to 15 minutes to perform. After 1 session, these were her results. If you'd like to learn more or purchase a PowerCore 360 product for yourself, visit PowerCore360.com.